Welcome to this evening's virtual convocation, a poetry reading by Stephen Pitters. This event is part of Centenary College of Louisiana's Dream Week 2021, whose theme is Becoming the Beloved Community, a phrase popularized by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Chris Brown. I manage the archives here at Centenary College, and I also serve on the college's Convocations Committee. It's my pleasure to facilitate this event, which is underwritten by Centenary's Attaway Professorships in Civic Culture. As we begin, I'd like to share some details about our speaker, as well as some logistical information about tonight's event. In the fall of 1967, Stephen Pitters, then from New York City, enrolled at Centenary College. He is among Centenary's first Black undergraduate students following the college's racial integration in January 1966. These days, Pitters is a poet and host of the Spokane Open Poetry radio program in his home state of Washington. He joined us in November 2020 for a convocation about his time at Centenary. And you can view this on Centenary's YouTube channel. For tonight's event, Pitters will read poetry from his ongoing book series. Now for some logistics about the convocation event being online. We've scheduled 1 hour for this event. Throughout, you'll hear Stephen Pitters reading the poetry, and you'll also have on another screen inside Zoom some slides where you'll see the book cover art as well as the text where we can follow along with the poem. Do know that there are some slight recent alterations in the text, and you might even hear a little bit later on from Mr. Pitters about why poets sometimes do that. After the poetry reading, we'll have a question and answer portion for the audience. You can use the chat box to ask a question or just signal that you would like to be unmuted and ask the question yourself. Please note, this event is being recorded and will be posted on the college's YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. Centenary students with us tonight who are seeking passport points, I will provide the QR code on a slide toward the end of the event. That does it for our introduction. And now I will turn things over to Stephen Pitters. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Again, it's my pleasure to be here to read excerpts from my 8 books. And again, whatever questions you might have, I'll be more than happy to answer them. And so, again, I'm very grateful to be a part of the Dream Week. And let's get ready to be entertained. But let me say something before I actually begin reading. When I normally do a reading, I like to say one thing to the audience. I would like to give you a treat, well, not so much a treat, a gift. And that gift is, starting with my 4th book, I started collaborating with other artists. And one of the things I do is I will take a poem and present it to a musician, friends of mine, and have them make it into a song. And as we go through the reading today, I will play one of those, actually 2 of those musical numbers, okay? And the thing is, if you would like any of those songs that's been made from the poems, they are free. They are free downloads. All you have to do is go to soundcloud.com and Poet Stephen Pitters, and you can download those particular songs which have been made from some of the poems that I've written. So that's my gift to you. All right, so let's get started. The first poem I'm going to read is from this particular book, which is called Bridges of Visions. And it's about, given the fact that yesterday was Martin Luther King's birthday, I'm reading a poem that I wrote back in the day about, it was times about civil rights. Okay, Made in America. When I left yesterday, I took a long walk through the night in search of tomorrow. I found potholes of ignorance and fear cluttering the highways. Each hole rebuked the need for change with rage and sanguine delight. The comfort of the past made men into porcine skeptics and rabid baying hounds who would bare their teeth, letting the blood of saints form picturesque windows. The death knell was a poor messenger, weak from use and haggard with remorse. Tired of the wagging tongue of deceit, they chose to heave another pound of flesh upon the pile of those gone asunder. There are no riches in the dew of tears. There are no parting gifts for those young in years. Only the remembrance of a mighty song, "We shall overcome," and a road sign marked, "America, that way." That was from book 1. Now these are from book 2, Walks Through the Mind.
Hey, Steve, can I just jump in here with one quick question? I might
Yes.
as well ask the audience, please let me know if you are able to both see the slides and hear the speaking going on. If someone can just give me something in the chat box. Yes, fantastic. That means this is working. Let's keep
Okay.
going. I just wanted to check in with you guys. I appreciate y'all tuning in as well as answering that.
Okay, here is the next poem is Catching the Dove from book 2. And the idea here is from one community to the next. They marched through mud and tall grass to strange wooden ships. The African young men and women had no vision of their future, but felt their past being stolen. They were the victims of tribal warfare on a new economy unknown to them on a distant continent. Their charcoal bodies were suppressed beneath creaking planks for a sea crossing many did not fare well to complete. The conspiracy between Black and white traders for coins of the realm professed itself coldly around their ankles with iron shackles worn snugly by the innocent and bewildered Africans. For hundreds of years, they would continue to bear the heavy bonds of steel that tore their skin. There was the sadness of humanity mirrored in the forced will of others who made their dark skin the mission of servitude for a foreign land's unjust cause. To the Blacks, they were the remedy of their defamation. They have the red juice ripped from their Black veins savagely by the master's hideous lash, with its absolution and unrestrained power. The Black young men maintain their honor and character, and over time unravel the gross crime brought by the crossing. A slave salvation was not blinded, but ushered away in physical abuse. Under the distorted fears their rulers displayed with a subjugation creed. The shadow of change, however, would soon begin its descent when the Africans grew tired of being used as chattel. With strength of will and raised voices, these pilgrims, suffering slowly, forced their white masters to pay the debt honor required for them being human and no longer property. The groans of times past waned, and the view the dove divine, while perched on a sturdy branch, arrived. Memphis, 1968, an ordinary morning, a spectacular harsh bullet sound was heard far, far away, and each and every day thereafter. The final sacrifice for freedom given by the new African for his time delayed, wish he would not have been again waylaid. The next poem from book 2 here is Surviving in a Different World. The Reservation. I thought I would meet death on some street corner or sweetly in bed. Life owes us only surprises and accountabilities for acts performed. I thought the end would visit me like it did him, the Christ, early in life at age 33. Catholic schools' teachings can cloud the mind of the young with beliefs in a higher purpose. It seemed, however, I escaped to wonder a few more years. I stumbled into the lives of those whose kindness towards me had meaning and others who cared less for my existence on this Louisiana campus, where some tried to reduce me to ashes with their dusty points of view. It was February 1968. White need superseded the value of those unlike them in thought, color, and spiritual beliefs. Written in the stalls, their abuses and its purpose made for them a world temporarily safe. I was diversity attempting to survive as a sideshow attraction. March 1968. A meal in Shreveport was still a challenge to be digested. My absence from campus life would have been sustenance for the fraternal orders. Historical thoughts such as these were built from vile contempt and the stupidity treasured in maintaining a colorless world order. Defeating this sordid view often required spilt blood. Who knew right had a need to stage a fight against the trigger's philosophy with its ultimate mortal sin? Martin, you did. Okay. The next poem is called Harvard Style from this book, Currencies of Life, Enlisted Behaviors. A point of learning. I give you a quick little background on this poem. When I was in graduate school in 1972 in Boston, I had to do a report. So I went to Harvard's library, and while there, I met or saw, I saw this beautiful young lady, and I just had to, go and say hello. And this is what happened when I did. Her sunset complexion drew my rising. Cautious feet becomes the messenger. Neither frowns nor rebukes demeanor were exchanged. A pleasant answer from her attractive face settles the inquiry. Thanks, but I'm otherwise engaged, she said. Forcing a smile, heels turning, a slow exhale shows the way to my retreating ego, maintaining its crown. From book 4, and book 4 is the beginning of a series of poems that I use decades in my life as inspiration for writing the poem so that I would never get into the point where I had writer's block. And so this is the nature of the rest of the books, starting with book 4. Okay. And this book the title is Conversations on Altered Roadways. This is a short poem, as you can see. And the background on this poem is John Donne was one of my favorite poets. And he wrote this very concise poem that I've always hoped I could write a poem that concise. And the poem that John Donne wrote went like this: John Donne, and done, undone. I mean, it could not get better. I mean, it was just incredible. And so this is my attempt to write a very concise poem. It's called Fragile Part 1. You, I, loving, an open sore, a closing door, you and I, no more. So there's my attempt to write a very concise poem. The next poem is called Guardians of Love, and it is from my 5th book, which is called Pre-Recorded. And I'm going to, after I read this poem, I'm going to play the musical interpretation of this poem done by a friend of mine who lives in California, Tracy De Leon, an incredible singer-songwriter. And this particular, there's 3 poems that I've written about this person. And the 3 songs, again, if you go on SoundCloud, you'll be able to get all of these songs that she made. Okay, Guardians of Love, celebrating her passing. A sweet rose have been deposed, broken from its stem, uprooted to face a swift and bitter end. No majestic flower should be so undone, like an exotic perfume released, made to drift on westerly air currents to the 4 corners of the earth, to lie there in crass stillness, devoured by time's ignoble reach. None left here behind dare reproach the pain that is our sorrowful gain, a long-acting stain for our hearts to be denied the happiness of her delightful style. Her gestures made our weighted down life worth the price of a gold bullion. She marked us well with her artistic fingers that crafted eternal beauty and hope. Michelangelo himself would give a compliment, applauding her use of them to reveal a noble bust hidden in the ordinary clay, which is her image set in our thoughts to last this and every other day. She isn't nor ever will be the ghost of memories, but the reservoir of the love we have for her that cures our hearts. She is the guardian of our resolve that will never, ever depart. Okay. That having been said, I'm going to move over here and start the song that was done to this poem.
Sweetest of all roses, broken from her stem, sweet majestic flower, face to bitter end, extraordinary fragrance, drifted on the wind to the earth's 4 corners and back to us again. She is the guardian of love, keeper of our hands, sculptor of love, memories, a priceless work of art. The happiness that bloomed in her divine delightful smile made our heaven New life in every stroke. She is the guardian of love, keeper of our heart, sculptor of our memories, priceless work of art. She is the guardian of love, keeper of our heart, sculptor of our memories, a priceless work of art, a priceless work of art.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy that song made from the poem Guardians of Love. So I have one other poem from the 5th book. It's a short one, and it's called Near Perfect. One of the things when someone writes is you hope that you'll get to a point where you might just be able to write a poem without a lot of revisions. And I think I woke up one day and this idea just flashed through my mind. It's called An Emotional View. Near perfect. You were always mourning, your face perfect, a spark borrowed from the risen sun, which constrained cruel fate's fun. The victory swallowed distaste, supplying the sweet remedy memory uses to reminisce. Near perfect. Okay. The next poem is called The Goddess Claim, and it's from book 6. And I should say that the cover for all but 3 of my books are done by my youngest daughter. She is the artist, the visual artist in the family. And she told me when she was 4 years old that she was an artist. So I guess she proved herself right, that she is an artist. Okay, so this particular poem is called The Goddess Claim, and I will tell you a little bit more about it, because whenever you write a poem, it's a story, and you use different things that happen in your life or something that you've seen to pull together the storyline. So this is The Goddess Claim, and I'll tell you a little bit about the story when I finish reading it to you. A Goddess Claim. It was a late August summer day. I was making my way up the winding hilly coast road along San Francisco Bay. The stony ridges were adorned with rows upon rows of wild, flaming yellow poppy flowers and red candy orchids. A gift at no cost to the artist's eye to fuel his imagination, that he may put brush to white canvas and create a memory, a legacy to answer his enduring existence. There around the curve, above the ground, in space, drifting, she stood perpendicular off the cliff's edge, staring outwardly, a stunning subject fit for painting. I was startled, astonished. I mashed the brakes. The blue Mustang sports car, Firestone rubber tires screeched loudly. Gripping hard, they sucked the surface of the concrete road, staining the pavement with two 15-yard long black wavy rubberized parallel lines. The sudden jerk whipped my upper body left to right. My shoulders banged against the driver's side window. Luckily, neither it nor I broke when the car jolted to its stop. Seemingly motionless, the enchanting ghostly figure turning faced me. My mind was bemused. I heard musical notes as if from flutes and violins speaking into my ear. Rolling down the window, the salty air outside the car rushed in over my skin. The strands of her ebony hair blew blithely. They swayed and danced with the wind. Her gentle smile and deep blue eyes said, I want to know you. I replied, how so? I questioned immediately my sense of reality, my sanity. Do I deserve the presence of this heavenly creature? I would jump from this cliff in an instant if she would save me from tasting the blue-green water smacking against the slimy rocks below. Had madness suddenly engulfed me? Were my thoughts illusory, the result of whiplash, a concussion? The waves buffeted the gray fungus-covered boulders in the ocean, streaming rhythmic echoes. Her angelic voice kept reaching out to me, speaking of times long before when the golden age of the Greek gods and goddesses, such as Apollo and Aphrodite, reigned. I saw her graceful feet wrapped by leather straps, hugging her diamond-shaped ankles in Grecian-like sandals. Was my future about to be disclosed or captured? She rotated her head, her chin touched her left shoulder, her raven hair partially veiled her cheek like a scarf hanging down to her shoulders. Those blue eyes, peeking persuasively, struck mine with black lashes that fluttered and consecrated me. I was her motive, her spring. To Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, she implored that she, a chaste goddess, be unrestricted and left to abide with, belong to her mortal flame. The God of gods without pause said, you on earth for good cause will remain and bask in the warmth of his sun, having been the righteous star, the North Star of the Milky Way. Okay, well, so what is that all about? Well, quickly speaking, it was a Saturday and we were living in California at the time. We took a quick trip. We were going across the Golden Gate Bridge from the Sausalito side. But before you get there, there's an exit. And if you take that exit, it'll take you into a valley that leads to where you can cross another small bridge to a lighthouse. What happened is we did that, and while there, we encountered a whole bunch of folks, and there was this young man who, when a biplane came over, it said, would you marry me, Mary? And the young lady was so overcome, of course she said yes. But the funny part is that all the other people who were there, or men with their ladies and so forth, the ladies looked at them and said something to the extent of, why don't you do that? So that was the nature of that scenario. Okay. So here we go. This is the 7th book. It's called Contesting. And again, this is another, the cover of which is done by my youngest daughter. And this one is another one of those, it's a short poem. And it came to me one day, and I decided, well, I'm going to write my epitaph. So this is my epitaph. It's life's values and introspective. Epitaph. When I die, I pray my sins forgive me and show the mercy God grants those who walked this earth in joy and peril. Epitaph. My epitaph. Okay. This is another short poem, and it is from this book, the virus book. And this particular book, the one I showed you before, came out in February of last year. And when the virus started to, be all over the place, every day I wrote a poem about the virus. And literally, before October, I end up writing about 60 or 70 poems about the virus, all aspect of the virus. Every time I saw the news, there was something about the virus and I was upset, I was angry, and I wrote about the virus. When they showed you those youngsters, in Texas, being put in cages, I was upset all the time. So I had to write about it to get that feeling out of me. So here's one of the first poems I wrote about the virus. 2020, the tone of days. In the face of life stands terror. Respect the days of dread, or the horrible virus fiend will descend and snatch what is pounding in your chest, putting you in a cold, seedy, everlasting rest. So there it is. Okay. All right. This other poem is also in that book, and it's a slightly different poem because I don't always put the same types of poem in a book, especially with this thing with the virus. I figure I need to put a different poem in there. And I also always write about my mother. And so this is about my mother. She died when I was 6 years old. And there's a musical piece that goes with this, so I'll play that in the background while I read this poem. "6 years old. I was 6 years old and I didn't know it. I didn't know how sick mom was. I didn't know how beautiful she was until today, 7 decades later. I sit here staring at her soft caramel face, short brown hair, slightly full lips, rounded cheekbones, narrow straight nose, and totally calm, serene countenance. I didn't stop loving her. I didn't fret. Dad probably did. He hid it as one day passed another, and night after night, a sniffle here and there was heard. From midnight to sunrise, I bared it, playing games as a child does. The malignant growth kept making gains, knowing her body's reserves. Her lungs were losing their puff. The young family spared themselves the best they could, while she dwindled on the bed across the white wrinkled sheets. I didn't know she was fighting a desperate battle, attempting to ward off the devil's unwanted piercing stopover. Her creamy visage maintained the subtle gleam she refused to hide. I hoped she could retain her son. The evil snake, however, had her backpedaling like an army in full retreat. The coughing tore her lungs. She winced. The raspy sound screamed murder off her tongue. Moving onto her left side, she became quiet. Stillness filled the night, pale chalk white room. I should have remembered how mom looked, but at 6, I didn't know better, except to suddenly cry and cry, confused at not accepting, feeling empty. I didn't know about hope's dreadful unease. and conflicted overwhelming horror, or the need to run and jump off the riverbank and swim to the other side. None such events happened. She didn't stand up. Days after, my chin almost made it down into the elevated black coffin at the church. I was able to stare once more upon her beautiful face. When there was around me was displaced. What there was around me was displaced. I was 6 and fixated on the solitary mental picture I couldn't resist morning, noon, and before night fell. Distracted after a time, I did forget. We as a family left her emotionally undiscovered. Loss deteriorates regret until the key, a visiting moment awakens, reestablishes the value I could no longer offset. I was grown. It will soon be over for both of us, and I will be sedately embedded in the bosom of my mother. Okay, and this is the last poem. It is from the book that will be coming out next month. It's called Lazarus. And the book is before, during, and after. And so that's coming out sometime next month. And this book is a continuation of the virus book, but taking the view from before the virus came, during the virus, and what we hope life is going to be after the virus comes under control, we hope. Okay. Lazarus. The rampaging tornado entered through the old-fashioned, though attractive domicile's front and side door, shattering its valuables stored in the upper and lower floors. Rooms exploded, the roof separated from its foundations, the violet paint on the outer walls peeled off. The wooden household partitions were scattered across the backyard and in the open fields 30 yards away. Iron pipes exposed gush water plumes upwards like Old Faithful at the Yellowstone, showering their previously pristine lawns. The hard work of the inhabitants was tumultuously scraped clean in the blink of an eye. The face of their beautiful effort was scarred, battered, like the military invasion on the Normandy beaches and the countryside by attacking force. The land incurred a lashing, bleeding from north, south, east, and west. The people's laments were heard day and night over the years. The polite history that had been formed was emphatically prosecuted by miscarriage of justice, pressured at the hands of leadership misdeeds. The pleasant earth was shaken and scolded, raised by this insidious two-pronged calamity, one from nature's anger without, the other from mankind's diminished acumen within. How was this awesome threat to be defended and defiled? The considerate amongst us pondered and pondered, like the sound of the clock's arm ticking. They held fast, refusing to yield in the sea of an egregious catastrophe. The democratic different men and women maintained themselves on solid ground, developing the necessary materials, confidence, conviction, belief, acceptance, and respect of brotherhood. Their creative cognitive will stop the appalling march which ravaged the citizenship and had them spinning, twirling like a top, confused and deformed. Rectifying the beleaguered estate necessitated an Herculean exertion that could not be delayed, giving that those inside these American riverbanks had been suffering and suffering these years and needed relief immediately. The disagreeable argument, ill-conceived, between proper behavior and coarse comportment had to be undone, confined to a monastery for spiritual guidance, to embrace virtues rather than unleashing continued sinful digress, or urged by the heralds reporting falsified, incongruous, monumental inconsistencies. The country was indeed stumbling, lost from being separated, castrated, divided between objective fact and misguided fiction. There was a call for the usefulness of a stitch in time to bind its tattered texture, to close the broken seams that true progress may resume and exhume from the grave Lazarus' claim as life being renewed. And that is the end, my friends. I hope that you had a good day and a good night and you are healthy, as is your family. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me now.
Okay, I see one question that came in, and
Only one?
one so far.
Okay.
All right, and a few more coming in. All right, let's start with this one. This is a good beginning. All right. Vaisarasi asks or says, Stephen, I don't know if you covered this in the beginning, but I would like to know a little bit about your background. Where are you from?
Okay, I'm from Panama. I'm born in Panama and came to these United States when I was 10 years old.
Let me push that just a little bit further. How did you end up from Panama to New York to Shreveport?
Well, there was a few states in between. Well, my father came to New York a few years before he sent for my brother and I. And anybody who is an immigrant knows that you have some great big dreams about these United States. I mean, you think it's the greatest place and the greatest opportunity and the greatest everything, even to the first day that you come from a warm climate and you see the first snowfalls. And let me say this, and this is a quick aside, because I remember when I was in Shreveport and there was a snowfall. It was like this big and everybody was panicking. And so that was the first time I saw snow in New York City. It was a whole lot of it, and we ran outside and jumped around in the snow and lift our faces up to the heavens and try to catch snowflakes in our tongues. After being in New York, that's when I came down to Louisiana, went back to New York, then went to Massachusetts to go to graduate school, then went after graduate school, worked a few years, and then went to Pennsylvania to get another graduate degree, then came back to the East Coast, and then I'd gotten married and my wife she was in the military, and she wanted to go to the West Coast. She got an assignment. And so that's how we ended up in Washington.
All right. So for the next question, let me also say, if anyone wants to ask their question themselves, give me a heads up that you're interested in doing that. Otherwise, I will just continue to read them off. So here is a two-part question. This is from Dr. Jefferson Hendricks in the English department
How you
here.
doing? I know him.
Here's the first question.
All right, maybe I don't.
How does your poetry primarily function for you personally? As artistic self-expression, as social commentary, as therapy, or all of the above?
All of the above, because I tell you the truth, when I started writing, actually now more than when I began, as I said, I've always liked poetry, and I should give a shout out to Herb Fackler. He was at the school when I was there. He was my English teacher, and he helped me a lot with being able to, just obviously write better. And I remember in his office, he had a picture of it's a cartoon, and it was a cartoon of a teacher, cap and gown, up against a wall, and he was going to be executed. And it says, publish or perish, and he hasn't published. So I always remembered about that. But many the other English teachers that I had, but I always remember Mr. Fackler's good guy. And going along with how I use it, it's like my poetry allows me to vent, and because I have a degree I'm a clinical psychotherapist. And so I have a degree in that area. And I find that if I'm upset about something, I can write it out of me. And now I feel better and I have something of value. And that's pretty much the way I work through it. Because it's like anything else. If you are a visual artist or a musician, that's probably the same thing, one does. Because it's the passion I have about poetry. Of the three things that I value most in my life, poetry is one of them, because it really helps me to deal with any emotional upheaval I may encounter.
All right, for our next question, I am going to try to loop the person in themselves to ask it. So let's see if we can connect Jordan in. All right, I think we're good to go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Jordan. Thank you so much for reading to us. So my question is, do you have a routine for writing poetry, or does the process change with every poem?
It's more when a lot of time, for example, when I write a particular book, I don't always write it at the same time in the same place. So like this particular book was written all, mostly in the early evening, because it was the pieces mostly, as I mentioned, came after I saw the news, and I was upset and angry, and I had to run upstairs and write a piece and get it out of me. So if you could give me a return to the question, because I think I may have said something and went off a little bit inside. So
I asked if you had a routine for writing poetry, or if your process changed with every poem.
Okay, my routine is now that I am retired and I don't have to worry about getting up early in the morning. I normally will get up at around 9 o'clock, go to the computer room and write a piece, and that's my routine. I write, and I try to write a poem every day, a new poem every day, or at least the first draft of the poem, and go from there. And as I mentioned, with the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth book. Those are all written based on my life, as in when I was 17, the first one in the series, which was Conversations and Altered Roadways. I started using this methodology where I would take a point. I started writing about what I did when I was 17 through 35. And I've continued that. And each and every of the next 4 books, they take a different decade in my life. So that makes it a whole lot easier. Why? Because the thing that you can write about most is that which you know, and that which you know is yourself. So therefore, you're never going to have writer's block, because I don't know how old you are. You look like maybe you're about...
I'm 18.
18. Okay.
Yes.
You're younger than my youngest daughter. She's 19. She's a freshman. But the thing about it, if you're 18, think about what you were doing when you say we're about 15 to 18. I'll give you that because that's probably, I didn't want to say what you were doing when you were 10, but say what were you doing when you were 15 to 18, and the places you went, the persons you know, the activities you participated in, and all of that sort of thing. And you can draw from that to craft the storyline that you want to go with.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the question.
All right, for our next question, let's see, how about over to one that was typed by Kalen Walker. And he says, how do you think the death of your mother affected you as a poet?
Okay. Again, going back to my 4th through 8th book, 9th actually. When I got older, after being in this country, because my mother died when we were living in Panama, the country, not Panama, Florida. If there's a Panama, Florida, I think there is, but whatever. Anyway, so it's also when my father died. I waited like almost 10 years before I started writing about it. But when my mother, and so now I've put both those two things together, because in every book since my 4th book forward, I write something about my mother or my father or the family. And I actually, I did write some poems about my father for my first book, but remember my first book was not published until 2009. So again, I started, I would say from that time, writing things about my parents. And it's really, it's an emotional journey every time I think about one of them. But let me tell you how that comes about. I will hear a song and it will just get me rolling. For example, when I write about my father, it's usually triggered by the song Dance with My Father. If you remember that song, I forget who sang it, but Dance with My Father. And I always end up writing something because that is a memory that's triggered. And about my mother, seeing her picture in the family album, just dry, it moves me. That's the word I'm thinking about. It wasn't something crazy, but it moves me because I truly didn't realize how beautiful my mother was or looked. Because remember, she passed away when I was 6. And so, looking at her picture and seeing how beautiful she was, and then you start remembering all the changes and things of that nature that you went through afterwards. But I mean, it might sound silly, because people might think, well, you love your parents. Yeah, yeah, but it's a different type of thing. But she, just looking at her, she is just beautiful. I mean, and I can write about her. I can fantasize about, I can make up stories about how she was and what she did, even though that was, when I was so young. So I'm taking artistic liberties, when I write some of those particular things. Okay. Does that answer the question?
All right. We got a response. Yes, it does answer the question. Thank you.
Okay.
So I need to mention a couple of things here. First, for students who need that QR code, I will share that on the screen in just a moment. And the second thing is we have probably 4 more questions if people are interested in sticking around for them. I know we're coming up on our hour mark. I am okay hanging out a little bit longer. Stephen, are you okay with hanging out?
I'm a retiree. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. Well, let me first show the QR code for the students. One moment. All right, I'll continue to leave that slide up for a moment while I go ahead and pitch the next question to you. So this question is from Mallory Smith. It says, Mr. Pitters, do you have any particular experiences at Centenary College that influenced you creatively?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, this book, which is entitled Walks Through the Mind, if you go to, actually, it's the first chapter in the book. It's called A Southern Tale. There, I've written a number of poems about some of my events that occurred when I was at Centenary. And also, because not all the events occurred while I was on campus. Some occurred when I was off campus. Some occurred when, like right after Martin Luther King died, and some of us were driving back home, and we went through Knoxville, and it was, the entire city was so quiet, and there were state troopers, and these guys looked like they each were like 6'5", and it was frightening. It was a frightening time to drive back home right after an event such as that. And so a number of, like one of the poems actually that I read, I put some of those particular emotions and situations within the poem, because remember when you write a piece, you mix and match a lot of things. As you can see, like for example, the poem Catching the Dove and Reservations, those are all instigated during the time I was at Centenary. And again, part of that was, when right after Martin Luther King was killed and so forth. So that entire chapter has a lot of events that happened while I was at Centenary.
Okay, so for our next question, I am going to see if we can, I think we got a connection.
Hello?
Yes.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Pitters.
My pleasure.
You were talking about your background earlier, and you said that you came to the United States in this big new city with big dreams and ambitions, correct?
Yes.
What advice would you give to a young person who's going through the same struggles of, I guess, immigration in the United States?
Well, there's an expression, you take it as a challenge or you take it as a threat. If you take it as a challenge, then you can accomplish whatever dreams you have. Also relating, thinking about, being with your parents, a parent or parents, because when I came, it was just my father, because I said my mother had passed away years before. And what are your goals and aspirations? And staying the course. My family believed in education above all else. It's all about education because right now and even before, you cannot move forward and achieve your dreams without resources. So how do you develop resources? And so that was the focus of the family. That is still the focus of my family with my young daughter. Yeah, it's all about, the bar is set high. The bar is set high and you achieve those. And then you provide yourself with resources, intellectual resources, academic resources, depending on what area, what are your goals? What do you want to be, quote unquote, when you grow up? And you follow those. There's no room to say, no, this is not good enough. No, you can achieve whatever it is you achieve if you are committed. And also realize one thing, and that goes back to this particular book, Bridges of Visions. And I'll tell you one thing, when I came back from Centenary, I got a job working in the South Bronx in a social service agency. I was fortunate to run into this woman. She was a nun and she would go to South America. And she taught me about the fact that she told me about this particular school, this graduate school in Boston, and I applied and went there. And it's one of the best graduate schools for clinical social work in the country. But the thing is, no one gets through life or anywhere without assistance from someone else. And we are all just bridges over which others may cross. That's the line she used, bridges over which others may cross. And it's almost like something I just saw on TV. If you do good, good will come back to you. And so those are the particular things which I am most committed to, is education and operationalizing whatever dreams, and hopefully your parents are there to support you. And along the way, you run into someone who gives you a bit of information. I'm not talking about money. I'm mostly talking about information that you can use to go forward in achieving whatever goals you have or whatever academic pursuits you have, when you get here. Because it's here if you want to address it. Other than, going internally negatively, that does not help. Okay. And the other part I look at is, it's something I have actually. I bought it at Centenary. It was a placard that says, "Be who you is," because if you be who you ain't, then you ain't who you is. And I bought this thing at the bookstore one spring day in Centenary when they were having book sales. And I've kept that book and I have it in my room and I talk to my kids about that. Be who you is, because if you be who you ain't, then you ain't who you is. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Thank you so much. It really does.
Okay.
All right, Stephen, for our next question, this is another one from Dr. Jeff Hendricks, and I am going to loop him in to ask the question himself.
How you doing? It's been a long time since I've seen you.
It has been, Stephen. How are you doing?
Hey, as I said, I'm a retiree. I'm taking it easy. I'm sleeping late, writing poetry, and staying indoors away from others who might shorten my lifespan.
I understand. Well, it was great to have you here tonight, and so thank you so much for being back, quote, on campus with us for a while.
Oh, yeah.
But I did have a quick question. The Centenary experience you had was obviously painful at times.
Oh,
But
yes.
as you've aged, have your feelings and perspective changed about those days? And as a
Well-
counselor, what recommendations do you have to our students about how to deal with painful memories and experiences?
Put them into context. One, no individual place or person can be the sine qua non of all things. There are going to be difficult things and there are going to be very good things, and they're going to balance themselves out. And that is what I found out about Centenary. And I think when I was here in November, I mentioned that because I came with my own attitudes and issues and wanting, and I found out that they were not all true. It was like a 50-50 outcome. The people I met, the people who helped me, the people who I still connect with, like Steve Caraway, Big L or Liddell Smith, let's see, and some other folks. I just got back in touch with some other people. And the thing being that how many of us have friendships that last so long? And to think that I still have friendships with some of those people 50 years later, woo, that's kind of wow. So it's really, it's not all one way or another. I think, because not every place is bad, not every individual is ridiculous. There are good people wherever you go. You just have to know how to avoid the nonsense and, stay positive.
Thank you very, very much, Stephen. We really
like your-
appreciate it.
I like your glasses.
Oh, thanks.
Hope I see you again.
I know.
If this thing goes away, I can make another trip down to Shreveport and go over to that place across the street and get some good piece of pie.
Absolutely. We'll do that for sure.
Okay.
Looking forward to that, Stephen.
So am I. So am I.
All right, Stephen, I have the next question set up for you. This is from Emily Adams.
Okay, Emily Adams.
Says, first off, thank you for reading to us. They were all amazing. My question is, have you noticed a shift in your poetry style as you've gotten older?
Very much so. Very much so. My first 3 books, I was struggling. I didn't think I was struggling, but I really was struggling. And I was fortunate to, this is like going back to Bridges of Visions. One day when I was interviewing a friend of mine at the radio station, she said to me, Steve, why don't you publish? I said, what are you talking about? I mean, I was just writing and putting things in folders and writing and whatever. But she connected me with Tom and Iris Gribble of Gribble Press. And they are one of the best folks around when it comes to publishing. And by meeting them, they helped me to craft the way I write. And the main thing that they did for me is they didn't try to change me or put me in a box or in some manner based on how people are trained when they go to MFA programs and so forth. And so they inform me, say, this is who you are. This, you write with passion and energy, and don't try to change how you are. You can fine tune it, but don't try to change what works for you. Again, be who you is type of idea. And so they work with me to help me to craft the way I write and so forth, so that, and the goal that they always have for me is that every book needs to be better than the one before. So going back to one of those English statements that I always remember, 100 visions and revisions before cake and tea. T.S. Eliot, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And so that is one thing I try to do, is every book, I try to make it better. I try to write better. I try to craft it. And that has helped me to feel the difference. And as I said, I look at the first 3 books and the poems that I wrote and how I wrote, and I realized if you saw the amount of changes I that I made in some of the pieces in the first three books, the poems, the first 3 books, you'd be surprised. But that is what happened. Whenever I write a poem, I go back and I revise and I revise and I revise until I get to the point where there's a saying around here. Some friends of mine said that the poem is never done. It is mainly put to sleep. And when you read it again, it wakes up and you will make a change. However the change may be, it does not have to be very long and whatever, but normally the rhythms, the conjunctions, just the subtle changes, because again, what my editors have helped me with is when it goes on paper, then someone else is going to look at it. And that's where you're going to find out, what you could have done better had you tried harder to fine tune the message, and so forth. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, I see another question has come through now from anonymous attendee. And the question is, what makes poetry a more impactful form of writing for you compared to short stories or other forms of prose?
It is who I am. Okay. All I do is write poetry. And I've always written poetry. It means an enormous, it means a whole lot to me. I can't say how much it means to me. As I said, there are 3 things that I value most in life, and poetry is one of them. I live to write poetry. All the feelings I get, I can channel it through the poetry that I write. And I think it's the same for someone who writes short stories or novels or plays music or visual art or does quilting and so forth. It is art, and art is singular in focus by virtue of the person and the type of art that person is developing and putting forth.
All right, thank you. And I will kind of combine the next question with a couple that have come through this evening. And more than one person has asked, what was your favorite poem to write? And what was the hardest one to write?
Okay, I can say the favorite poem to write was the one I wrote that was extremely concise. And because it was a goal I had to write a poem the way John Donne wrote that very concise poem, and I wanted to do that. To me, that was, like, gosh, I would like to, to write a poem this concise and that clear, and it's like, boom, hit it nail on the head, and it's like I did it. I actually wrote that poem. Okay, the hardest poem I had to write was, it's not just one, it's the ones I write about my parents, because those are, it's the emotional pain that they bring about. Or, those are the ones that when I write them, I'm almost in tears. And because it's, if you've had a close relationship with your parents and they pass away, no matter how old you are, when you step back in time and you think about them, it brings up, it's like something that wells up in your stomach and through your chest and in your mind, and it gives you a headache. And again, those are very hard. It's not so hard to write as when I write them, they wear me out. They really wear me out a lot. Emotionally, they just wear me out. And the other poem is actually, it's actually in this first book, there's a chapter about my dog. And I wrote a number of poems about my dog, and I had to put him down, take him to the vet and have them put him down. And we had that dog for about 13 years. His name was Arnie. And that's one of those that just tear me away, because the poem I wrote had to do when we took him to the vet, and the dog looked at us and said, like, take me here because I just can't go on. He had reached a point where he was just so, he was almost decomposing, although, he was just at that point, and he knew it was the end, and he looked at us and just with his eyes asked us to, like, take me to the vet. Let's close the door on this. And that one of those poems was, again, one of the hardest poems. I don't know about you, but people with animals, especially animals that live a long while, and when they get to that point, it's rough. It is rough. And so I had to write those poems in order to get that pain out of myself. So those two, it's not the one, but it's the two, areas and the impact that it has, still has. Okay, so I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions that have been asked, and we are at the 1 hour, 20-minute mark. So I think this is a pretty good time to wrap up, unless, Stephen, do you have any other comments before I just jump into an outro?
No, I only to say thank you all for coming and listening as to the pieces. Thank you all for your questions, and I hope that you will take the time to go on SoundCloud.com, Poet Stephen Pitters, and get those free songs about the poems. It's my way of saying thank you for sharing your time, and I hope that I can at some time in the future come back or do another reading, because my goal is to at least publish 2 books a year, since I have 6 other books that's ready to be manuscripts that's ready to be put into book form. And as I was talking to my editor, I said, I have these 6 books, And I'm gonna, let's get together and try to do 2 a year because we both might be running out of time.
Thank you for reminding about the SoundCloud option or website. I did plug a link into the chat for attendees to see. So they should have that they can follow.
Okay.
All right. As we wrap this up, I just want to say thank you very much, Stephen Pitters. And thank you very much, Centenary Convocations Committee members who helped out with this event. And also thank you very much to the Centenary folks who are managing Dream Week events all week long. Also, thank you to Centenary's Attaway Professorships in Civic Culture, which provided funding for this event. And thank you very much for attending this event. Let me mention our next convocation taking place Thursday, January 21st at 11:15 a.m. Central Time. It features Dr. Patricia Matthew from the Centenary class of 1991, and it's followed by a question and answer facilitated by Dr. Jefferson Hendricks. Dr. Matthew teaches courses in British Romanticism, the history of the novel, and British abolitionist literature at Montclair State University in New Jersey. Her work on diversity has been featured in the Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Education, and the Los Angeles Review of Books. For more details about this year's Dream Week events taking place all week long, you can check out the website www.centenary.edu/MLK. Thanks again for participating in tonight's event. It was great.
Another day, another way.